These are 4 unsolved mysteries that still can't be explained. Hope you enjoy. Let's begin. Number 1. On August 23rd, 1987, 2 teenage boys, Don Henry, 16, and Kevin Ives, 17, were run over by a cargo train in Bryant, Arkansas. They were lying next to each other in straight lines across the tracks and failed to move when the driver honked at them. The train was unable to stop in time. The boys had gone out to do some late night hunting, and Don's rifle was lying beside them. Several witnesses said they were partially covered by a green tarp. Originally, the deaths of the 2 boys were ruled to be a tragic accident. The state medical examiner ruled that Don and Kevin had the equivalent of 20 marijuana cigarettes in their system and were too impaired to hear the oncoming train. Despite the several reports of a green tarp covering the boys on the tracks, no tarp was found, and police who searched the scene denied that it ever existed. The families of the boys insisted that the scenario posed by the investigators didn't make any sense, and finally forced them to reopen the case 5 months later. A new autopsy concluded that the boys had smoked not 20, but 1 to 3 joints between the 2 of them. Stab marks were found on Don's shirt, and it was determined that by the time the train hit them, one of the boys was already dead, the other unconscious. The deaths were reclassified as homicides. A rumour circulated of an unidentified man in military clothing loitering in the area, both in the days before Don and Kevin's murders, and on the same night, but he was never identified. One witness had come forward and stated that he saw a police officer beating 2 boys in a store parking lot, tossing them into a truck and driving away, but it has not been confirmed that they were Kevin and Don. One theory is that they accidentally witnessed a drug drop. Linda Ives, Kevin's mother, released a video in 1996 detailing a cover-up of an alleged drug ring in Saline County and implicated many people in this conspiracy. The family has an extensive website dedicated to the evidence for their claims. Several years earlier, on June 25, 1984, 2 young men in Ogden, Oklahoma, were also run over by a train. Billy Don Hainline, 21, and Dennis Decker, 26, were found lying on the tracks together, with a small amount of alcohol in their systems. Their deaths were ruled accidental. 1 month later, a meth lab was found approximately 1.5 miles from where their bodies had been located. The case was eventually reopened, but no evidence of foul play was ever found. The official conclusion is that they fell asleep on the tracks, but the conditions were eerily similar to that of Henry and Ives. Number 2. The Doodler, also known as the Black Doodler, is an unidentified serial killer believed responsible for 14 murders and 3 assaults of men in the gay community of San Francisco, California, between January 1974 and September 1975. The nickname was given due to the perpetrator's habit of sketching his victims prior to their sexual encounters and slayings by stabbing. The perpetrator met his victims at gay nightclubs, bars and restaurants. Police theorized that the victims had all died after meeting with the suspects near their locations where the bodies were recovered. Police initially believed there could have been as many as 3 different perpetrators during the early stages of the investigation. It's believed Doodler's first victim was Gerald Earl Kavanaugh, a Canadian-American immigrant. He was 49 years old at the time of his slaying, which had occurred by stabbing. Kavanaugh's full-clothed body was located on January 24, 1974, lying face up on Ocean Beach in San Francisco, California, in the early hours of the morning. He had died hours before. He was determined to have been conscious at the time he was killed, and had attempted to resist his killer because he had self-defense wounds. Joseph Stevens was discovered by a woman walking along Spreckles Lake, located in San Francisco, on June 25, 1974. Stevens was 27 years old and had died shortly before his body was found. He had been witnessed at a club the previous day. He was employed as a female impersonator and comedian. Officers suspected that Stevens was alive at the time he had been at Spreckles Lake, possibly transporting himself to the area with his killer. Klaus Krussmann, a German-American immigrant, was discovered by a woman walking her dog on July 7, 1974. His death had been somewhat more violent than the previous murders because he had considerably more stab wounds than Stevens and had been slashed in the throat several times. The body was fully clothed. Chrisman, unlike the previous victims, was married and had children. The fact they had a makeup tube on this person when he died suggested to police he may have been a closet gay man. The final two victims were Frederick Kappin and Harold Golber. Now these two victims survived the Doodler serial killer, so you're most likely wondering why was the Doodler never caught? Well, during the investigation, the police questioned a young man as a murder suspect in the case, but could not proceed with criminal charges because the three surviving victims did not want to out themselves by testifying against him in court. Among the stabbing survivors were a well-known entertainer and a diplomat. The suspect cooperated with the police during his interview, but he never admitted guilt for the murders and attacks. Officers stated that they strongly believed that the man in question was responsible for the crimes, but he was never tried or convicted because of the survivors' refusals to appear in court. Two other potential suspects arose in 1977 after a pair of men from Redondo Beach and Riverside, California, were questioned after their arrest under suspicion of murder with similar circumstances, approximately 28 that occurred after homosexual encounters. As of May 2018, the case is opened and ongoing in the San Francisco Police Department. With new DNA technology since the crimes, the police department has been trying to see where the case is at and if anything is worth sending to a DNA lab. Number 3. On December 20th, 1976, Kenneth Jumper Jr., a 14-year-old, found a gruesome discovery. He was playing in the area when under the westbound bridge of Lehigh River in Whitehaven, Pennsylvania, along Interstate 80, he discovered a head and several parts of a body of a young woman lying near the rocks. Near the dismembered body were 3 suitcases. Inside these suitcases were other parts of the young woman. If this was not horrifying enough, Kenneth also found a fetus lying near the rocks. It's believed that whoever murdered and dismembered this pregnant young woman must have thrown the suitcases over the bridge, which then 2 of the suitcases most likely opened up on impact. It's believed that the killer chucked out the suitcases while driving and intended the suitcases to land in the river, not on the bank. The nose and ears were cut off the head and the breasts were cut off from the chest. Absolutely disturbing. After the body was found, a fingerprint was taken, as well as having her teeth examined. Both tests came back with no match on the FBI database. There was also no missing report of a lady of that description. A sketch of the lady was sent to media outlets, but not many leads came back. An autopsy concluded that she was sexually assaulted, strangled, and shot in the neck by an unknown person. The medical examiner also found a set of numbers that are written on the victim's body. The writing consisted of the letters WSR and the number 4 or 5, followed by 4 or 7. What did these letters and numbers mean? 2 of the suitcases were striped with red, blue and white, and the other suitcase was tan with a plaid design. They were of vinyl material and were of the same size. It was evidence that the suitcases had been spray painted black at some point, and that their handles had been severed. Other evidence included straw, packaging foam, a bedspread, and waterlogged fragments of a newspaper later determined to have been the New York Sunday from September 26, 1976. The bedding and part of the newspaper had been wrapped over some of the body parts. The newspaper was linked to the northern part of New Jersey, where the perpetrator may have had ties. The bedspread in the suitcases had a reddish-orange colour, was made of chenille fabric, and was wrapped around some of the body. It had yellow and pink embroidered flowers. The young woman's body was buried in 1983 after the victim remained unidentified for a number of years. Her remains were exhumed to obtain additional forensic evidence and to create a new facial reconstruction. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released 2 reconstructions, the latest in May 2015. She was believed to have been about 4'11" to 5'4", weighed about 140 pounds, and believed to have been in her 20s. The case is still unsolved. Number 4. Jody Severn was a 39-year-old mentally challenged woman. She was living alone, but still required being checked in by her parents. It was on February 14th, 2007, when they hadn't heard from Jody for a day or 2. So they went to her apartment on Valentine's Day 2007 and found her having sex with a man. The father thought he recognised who the man was. Embarrassed, the parents asked the two to get dressed while they waited in another room. After a lengthy wait, they checked in again, This time though, the man was gone. He must have escaped the room without anyone seeing him, and Jody had been strangled to death, her body already cold. The autopsy will later show that the actual cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. DNA analysis proved that the man her father thought she was with was not the killer. He had apparently been misidentified in the dark room. It has now been 11 years since Jodine was senselessly murdered is still unsolved.